Greetings, everyone. This is Payman Nosey, your friend, your coach. Today, I have another great, wonderful guest with a phenomenal story. My new good friend, Chris Hill from the UK, tropical UK today. And today has been in a sunny place, as you can see, warm, unlike usual, rain and cloudy. But yeah, we got connected to our good common friend, Stephen Gielan. And we had a beautiful, powerful chat last week. And from the first moment, not only we get along, but I really knew that I had to have him on the podcast. So here is just a little bit about him. He's a truly someone that will wow you because he loves adventure, is doing crazy things in a good way. Last year, for example, he ran from the top of the UK all the way to the bottom, 950 miles and 29 days. It was like, what, 60, 70 miles a day or something like that?
It's 30 to 40 miles a day.
40 miles. Okay, I don't want to kill you.
30 to
40
40
miles is
miles a
enough. Yeah.
day. Yeah.
That's what? That's two marathon, right? A day?
It's ultra marathon running every day.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And now this year is looking to double down on that and something even bigger. He's gonna be swimming across the English Channel, which is the sea between England and France. That's 21 miles. He's gonna do it in September. We had a chat. He said it's gonna take him about quite a few hours on an entire day, 9, 10 hours, non-stop by himself. No pause, no break, no nothing. So we're gonna unpack all of that. A little bit about them. He's uh, he's an addiction coach because he overcame addiction himself. He wrote a book about it titled "Get Your Life Back: The Road to Freedom from Addiction." And he also has a thirst, a love for traveling, living around the world, while impacting, uplifting, inspiring, empowering other people to do the same, especially to help them overcome, to mentor them, to guide them to overcome their addiction. And back to the English Crossing Channel swimming later this year. Not only it's an amazing feat, but also he's going to be raising money for charity. So more kudos for you for that. So yeah, lots of powerful things. I have a feeling that me and you, Chris, we're gonna do more than one episode because so much we can unpack. So without any further ado, my friend, welcome to the show.
Yeah. Thank you, Payman. Thank you for the introduction. It'd be
You're
good
welcome.
if it was 9, 10 hours to swim across the channel. I'm looking at maybe around 17 hours non-stop swimming. So
17?
17, yeah, something like
Holy
that.
smoke. Oh wow.
Yeah, it's a very long distance and time. There are people that have swum it, but you're talk in sub 10, but these are Olympians,
Oh
absolute.
yeah, it's different.
I only really started swimming in July last year, other
Wow.
than when I swam as a kid in a swimming pool. But we go on holiday, we splash around but we're not swimmers. So I only really started swimming in July last year. So that gives you a sense of, how big this challenge really is.
Wow. That makes it even more phenomenal. Wow. Amazing. We can unpack all of that in a moment, but first and foremost, for people who don't know you, Chris, tell us who's Chris as a man, as a human being. We're going to talk about your business and all your amazing feats you want to achieve. But first and foremost, as a man, as a human being, who's Chris?
No, like people ask me that question. I suppose I'm a change maker. I'm someone that likes to challenge the status quo, what's actually going on around us. I think that's how I've come to understand what I know and how I've gone on and been able to help other people. But, tragically, I lost my twin brother to a drug overdose, which, you can understand it, it completely devastated me. But, all of my life, I've been a questioner. If someone tells me something, instead of just being in compliance, I would always question what someone is telling me. And I suppose through education and school, I probably didn't do very well because no one likes to be questioned. And I suppose we all get pushed down a little bit. So we end up in compliance rather than, free will, free. So I suppose I'm a bit of a change maker. I like to do good in the world. I like to do charity work. Um, and I like to support people, but I also like to live. Like the conversation that we had last week is I'd love to do some traveling. I'd love to set, my business up on a laptop and travel and work and, inspire people around the world and stuff like that. So that's one of my, aspirations that I want to do. And yeah, I love doing things like this podcast and talking and sharing information. So yeah, that's
Beautiful. Love that. We're going to unpack all of that in a moment. But first of all, I'd like to ask you a series of rapid fire questions to further get to know you as a man, as a human being. Ready? What makes you happy?
feelings like just doing the things that make me feel good. So doing challenges, even though they're very tough, the harder you work, the more inspired you become, the more good feelings you get. Years ago, 20 years ago, I was using drink and drugs to
Mm,
get that buzz, to get that feeling. But the problem is there was no effort in that. It was instantaneous gratification with serious consequences. Now what I realize, if I work really hard, I get the same hit, and that's not me as an addict trying to get a hit, but what happiness is an emotion that we create inside. But to get that emotion, that we have to put effort in, and the harder you work, the more inspired you become. And so, I think this winter I've been doing a lot of ice water swimming, cold water swimming, and it was very, very difficult. But an hour after coming out and having the shakes, your brain, you're uplifted, you're energized. It's like you plugged yourself into a battery charger, and I feel like, you get that feeling for days on end, whereas drugs is really quick. You get a hit and then you drop, and then you've got to take more of the drug too. Whereas natural happiness is a constant. It can flow. And that's what I've realized, that in natural state of being, that we can create happiness. And that, and I try and inspire other people to do those kinds of things as well.
beautiful. Now, what makes you smile?
Doing things like this. I suppose, like, yeah, so doing good in the world,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that you're on the right path. I don't know, like I teach a bit of, I teach some law of attraction. It isn't how I get people out of predicaments, but ultimately our barometer every day is the way that we feel. So if you are feeling good yourself, then we will attract people and places and things into our life that will make you smile. So, but to smile, you have to learn how to smile yourself first,
Mm-hmm.
rather than expecting others to give you your happiness. And so create it yourself, and then you'll be inspired, and you will attract more things to
Oh.
smile. But seeing someone come out of recovery is a good thing. Although someone did say to me, how does it feel when someone does get out? And I think because of the loss of my brother, it's I'm not getting dopamine from that person recovering. I'm grateful that that person's got out, but my thoughts then go to the next person, because
Mm-hmm.
my job is continuous. So it's not like, wow, that's amazing, let's go and celebrate, this person's free. It's good on you, now you crack on. And I'm already on to the next person, helping that person. So
Absolutely. Now, let's take the happiness factors a couple of notches higher. What makes your heart sing? What sets your soul on fire?
it's a good question. so
Thank you.
so I do two things. I do, I've got like a commercial side of what I do, and I've also, I run a couple of charities on this side. So I love doing stuff where there's no financial incentive, that I'm able to give my time and efforts, and and I'm not rewarded for it. I'm not on a pedestal or anything else. I'm just part of a bigger team that give back with no expectation of, but that's what makes my heart sing. I get so much from that.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side, I realize that, sitting in this shop and on this laptop, everything does have to be paid for. But as I said, so it's not that I don't enjoy doing this. I do, but this is where, yeah, I love doing, where there's no financial stuff.
Absolutely. Contributing, giving back. Yes, absolutely. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, what makes you sad and angry?
Mm. So I try not to get sad and angry.
Mm,
Every anniversary of,
mm,
my brother's been gone 10 years. So naturally I will feel sad. it's always like on his anniversary, on our birthday, because we were twins, so I can, I do get sad on these days, but sometimes it's happy sadness, you know, and some of the things that have happened to me over the last 10 years is almost at these certain times there are, I've been given almost like, I don't know, like messages that have almost like come from my brother, that it's just something that's unexplainable, but to me, it creates
Mm.
comfort. And so even in the world of sadness, you can still get comfort from that, knowing that someone is still safe and
Mm-hmm.
potentially waiting for us and stuff like that. So yeah, angry, I don't really get. Anger is
Mm.
if it's not that I can't be angry, but I know through law of attraction, if I stay angry, then I'm going to attract more angry things. So,
Mm-hmm.
so if I have the feeling of anger, I try not to be angry, but I try to fix the problem rather than trying to express anger, because that, we're not really in control then. But it's not that you couldn't be angry, but it's understanding the fundamentals, what emotional states attract and stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm with you. Now, what scares you?
Sometimes the future. I'm just about to go on a swim camp, and
Oh
I'm
yeah.
checking water temperature. I
Oh
know
yeah.
I've got to be in this freezing water for about 6 hours a day and stuff. So I'm a little bit wobbly with but I know that fear isn't real. And the time I get to where this swim camp is, and it'll be sunny, and
Mm.
especially after doing cold water. I mean, I was swimming in 3, 4 degrees water at 0 degrees temperature. So, I've gone to the extreme to see what my body can physically cope. Um, so even though this swim camp I'm going is about 15 degrees, which is a lot warmer than 3 or 4 degrees, there's still this fear of, well, I've got to be in there for 6 hours and hypothermia and stuff like that. So, there's always the fear of the future, but when you get to that point, you realize that the fear isn't real when you're able to cope and
Mhm.
stuff like
Absolutely, absolutely. I can't wait to get to the point we're going to talk about this. We have so many questions on that alone, but in a few moments. Now, what would you say is your number one personal superpower?
that. I don't know. So yeah, the ability to have disconnected from the system,
Mm.
to have separated from my mind and physical body, to understand that I'm plugged into a universe, a system, and to understand, the independence of who I am and how the system works, creates a superpower in knowledge and understanding and decision making. And that's what I try, and everybody has that ability, and I try to give that to people.
Beautiful. Absolutely. What is one thing that you used to value that you do not value anymore?
Mm. I suppose material things.
Mm.
We're programmed to, wear certain clothes, drive a certain car, live in a certain house. There was a preset model. I always say that this thing is as human beings, we're more like commodities in a society where, our energies are extracted and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. And part of that is the conditioning of the clothes you wear,
Mm-hmm.
the stature where you are in society, the car you drive, and stuff like that, the school you went to. So again, I've broken those boundaries. Pre me writing my Get Your Life Back book, and doing what I've been doing, you're modeled into a society, and most people are told that you're not good enough and you'll never achieve, and this is where you'll stay, and don't question it. And but since I lost my brother, I lost all those fears, and I've gone to places, and met with certain people, and done things that completely break all those boundaries. And again, that's what I try to show people, that you are not what you were told, and
Mm.
that you can actually go create whatever you want, but you have to overcome the system, the mind. the way that we have been programmed. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, what is one thing that you did not value, but now you're valuing more and more?
so definitely people,
Mm,
people that we attract in our lives, I value my mind. I value the system because this is the system that I work with every day. Um, to be honest, I value life. Life is a very important path. I know we're only here for a short period. I think, for 33 years, I was lost in the system, believing that, we've all got to make £1 million. And if we don't make £1 million, we're never going to be happy. That then drove a lot of debt and relationship problems and, taking a lot of risks and stuff like that. I know drink and drugs relieved those pressures and stuff. So, I definitely value life. I value people, I value connection and yeah, I value being on the right path.
absolutely. Love that. Awesome, awesome. Now, you enjoy traveling, don't you?
So as of this moment, I don't do a lot of traveling, but I have aspirations of traveling.
Mm, awesome. We can do an entire episode on traveling, and we may do that in the future. But now I'd like to take you down a different type of traveling, down memory lane. So go back to when you were growing up as a young boy. You know, when we're kids, people around us, family, relatives, teachers, neighbors, friends ask us, "Hey, Chris, what do you want to become when you grow up?" What was your
Mhm.
answer to that as a young boy?
Good question. I suppose, from starting my first paper round to working in a local garage on a Saturday,
Mm,
like, we were born, I suppose, in what you could maybe would call a middle class family, but we never had a lot of money. My mum was always a stay-at-home mum. This is how the model used to work. The dads went to work, the mum stayed at home. So we had enough, but we certainly wasn't, we certainly didn't have plenty of money and stuff like that. So at a young age that we knew that we had to, we got a little bit of pocket money, but we had to go and get a job. And this was like I don't know, maybe 13 or 14 years old. So,
mm,
I started with a paper round, then I was doing a Saturday job. And I suppose that's really what inspired me to go on. I enjoyed working on cars. It started off with mechanics, then it was body work and stuff like that. So I didn't really have too many aspirations other than what that taught me was one day I want to run my own business. I wanted me to be my own boss and stuff like that. So I knew that at probably an early age. But other than that, I didn't really have aspirations of being a pilot, going into
oh,
the
wow.
army. No, I didn't. I'm saying I didn't
Oh,
have
okay,
those.
okay, okay,
I
okay.
I did have them aspirations.
Okay.
Other than that, I enjoyed my childhood. I enjoyed what we did. Um, I suppose when I was growing up, jobs were quite plentiful. When I left school at, 16, I could have walked into any real job. Qualifications wasn't really needed that much.
Mm,
Uh, so yeah, I had a quite an easy route into early adulthood, um, which
okay.
was which was fine.
Beautiful. What was your relationship with school? Did you love school or did you hate school?
So I definitely love school, but love school being with my friends and doing what we were doing. I certainly didn't
Yeah.
enjoy. I worked hard at school, but you know, I've recently, and I suppose everyone's on this bandwagon of ADHD and stuff, but I definitely am on the spectrum of ADHD or
Mhm,
something along them lines, which basically meant even though I worked hard at school, school didn't really work for me. I did struggle through school. So, and I suppose then I was seen as a naughty child rather than but I still remember now that, I didn't go to school as an adolescent, like, just trying to cause trouble. I went because, I knew I needed education and, so I did my best, but school didn't really work out for me.
mm. What were your favorite and least favorite subject in school?
Difficult to say. You know, I don't know if I had a terrible, I just got on, just went and just got on with things. My memory of school really is just with my friends and pals and, what we used to get up to and we used to cause chaos and used to bunk off, smoke cigarettes, latter stages. Like we used to go to a nightclub like on a Thursday night. I used to take my older brother's driving license. He used to have this paper driving license, and we used to, come into school the following day with a hangover. Like they're the kinds of things that I remember. The lessons were just lessons. Like we just had to comply and go into, so yeah. I suppose if I'd have knuckled down, then I would have had, I would have preferred this class to this class and stuff like that. But yeah, so.
So imagine that you just answered a little bit, but I want to go a bit deeper into that. Imagine that we're in the same class, say in grade 10 or grade 11. What kind of student and boy were you? Were you the reserved, quiet type, the shy type, the nerdy, the life of the party, the superstar, the clown? What kind of kid were you back then?
Yeah, I was definitely a leader.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I was definitely yeah, I think like the first year in secondary school there was I don't even know if it's like animal behavior really. It's everything, everyone sort of shifted to a certain stature,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and groups got formed quite quickly. Um especially with like when you're in the first year, like because it's slightly different, like but the first year of secondary school, so from 11 to 16, when you're that first year you are sort of protected, but then you've got the older years
Mm,
that you've got to survive from these older children and stuff like that, so friendships formed quite quickly, groups formed, and it become like a protective barrier
mm.
to anyone. I'm not saying that there was bullying, but you know so friendships form really quickly and stuff like that.
Yeah. You grew up in London?
So yeah, so originally from my family are from Brixton, which is
Okay.
central London, and we I was born in King's College Hospital, which and then we were living in Dulwich, which is it's still southeast London, and then but early on my mum and dad moved us out of London into
Mm,
Sidcup, which is I suppose it was called at the time called the suburbs,
mm,
almost like countryside, but now Sidcup is part of Greater London, so they just expanded London and we're still in London. But yeah, so
mm.
we did sort of move out of London and that's where we got schooled and stuff. But yeah, so originally Southeast London.
Perfect. And growing up in school, were you popular with the ladies?
So so I the junior schools and that it was a mixed school, but my secondary school was a boys' school.
Ah.
But there was a local girls' school, and there was but we used to have like youth clubs and that we used to go, and so
Mm,
yeah, there was always there was always that part.
cool.
So um, but we were boys and we were boisterous, and
Yeah. And you being the leader, you were leading by example.
but I wasn't like the leader, but like I just suppose, you know, I think we was all, to be honest, in the group of friends, we were all the same, but you had to stand up for yourself, because otherwise, and I go back to this like, it's almost like the animal kingdom where there's a certain grade of, like there's a certain lion.
Ranking. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's a so the higher you sit, the more protection that you're.
I can relate to that because I grew up in the south of France, and the first week in each class was very important because it would set up the tone. And the first week would literally get into fights
That's
to,
it.
to, to, to establish your dominance. And with ranking number one, I was ranked at one time as the number fourth in the totem rank as far as fighting in my entire school. And I was pretty good in football. So I was really well respected because of that.
Yeah, yeah.
Was it
So
the same
yeah,
for
so
you?
Yeah, so very, very similar. I mean, I was never great at sports,
Mm,
uh, but yeah, I suppose because there was me and my twin brother and the same, we had our older brother in the school, like, we already went into the school with a reputation, we were the naughty twins and, again, that then attracted certain people to us and stuff like that. But yeah, there was a few fights and stuff like that. My twin brother Rob was always the more upfront.
mm,
So, but if he was involved in a fight, then I'd have to get involved.
of
And
course, yeah.
I was always sort of in the background of that. But yeah, it was, yeah.
Cool. Awesome. You mentioned a little bit about your first job as a, what is it, newspaper delivery guy. Do you remember how much you paid the first time you worked?
It's just a few pounds. I remember I think I delivered the first lot and then I might have dumped the lot, the second lot.
How long did you last at that job?
Not that long, that first job. Not that long.
Mm,
I think I didn't get caught but yeah, but it was just a few, it wasn't easy.
mm,
Then getting a Saturday job in a mechanics garage was easier and I
mm.
enjoyed that.
Cool. So moving forward, you mentioned a little bit about that. How would you describe your path from the moment you left school to now? Would you say once you get into one lane, you were set for life, was smooth sailing? Or was it more like turns and twists, like a roller coaster?
I'll be honest, like before we left school, we was already involved with drinking drugs. And so when we left school, it became even more
Mm,
freedom to go and do that because once you get a job, you have more money,
yeah.
then it allowed you to do more things. And so at 16 stroke 17, we were out clubbing every week.
Mm,
We were taking things like ecstasy and
wow.
we were staying out for 2 or 3 days sometimes at a time. So, but there was a lot, I grew up in the early 70s and there was a lot of freedom then. My parents came out of the 60s, so, and their parents were in the war, like my grandparents. So from the war to the 60s, my parents' programming or upbringing was freedom. And
Mm,
so when they had their kids, which was us in the 70s, then we as children were given that freedom at a very early age, which was a good thing, but also a bad thing because we were, we were introduced to things a lot earlier. So I was smoking from the age of 7. I was drinking alcohol by the age of
wow.
yeah, I was, when I hit secondary school, one of my friends in the class, his dad was growing cannabis at home. So we were smoking cannabis by 11, you know.
Wow.
So there was all of these things. And like I said, at like 15 years old, we were already going to nightclubs with
Mm,
my brothers. So the time we left at 16, it was like a steam train into that world. So, but we all, on a Monday morning went to work, and then from Friday night onwards, we were out doing what we were doing. So, and that went on for many years. It was so there were no real aspirations
mm,
throughout that time because it was just feeding addictions. We didn't really understand addiction. It was just we were feeding our, you know, happiness, if you like, because we knew that that's what we were living for. But it was, it wasn't until I was about 33 that when everything, shifted and I got out that I realized that there's, a different life on the other side, a
mm.
much better life, a much more fulfilling life. But yeah, for a long, 20 odd years, it was just drinking drugs, work, drinking drugs.
So how did you get out of this lifestyle? Was it a specific moment that you said enough is enough, or was it something progressive?
They're definitely progressive. There's no easy route out of mental health and addiction.
Sure.
It's about, I suppose, we all start with the doctor, we get the tablets. I went to groups, I read books, I got hypnotized. Um, I tried lots of different things until, it was one day that my mother-in-law, she gave me this book and it was a guy called Alan Carr. It was an easy way to stop smoking. And, I never enjoyed smoking, it was more of a hindrance and a cost rather than I didn't get a high or a buzz from it. It was just, constantly smoking cigarettes. But I read this book one day and then I just miraculously stopped. There was no withdrawal, and I tried many, many times before. But this book gave me a sense of freedom that I'd never experienced before.
Wow.
But I hadn't read the book to stop taking drink or drugs. And so, yeah, it really inspired me that there was a potential route out of all of this.
Mm,
I did end up going back to smoking, and then this book, even though I read it again and again and again, it never ever got me back to what I first experienced. But that's what then set me on this journey of if this book got me there must be another way back. Because and this goes against a lot of what the recovery programs tell you, that you were born this way and you're going to die this way.
mm,
Well, actually, I'd already had that disproved through the Alan Carr method. And so with that self-realization, I went on a journey to try and find that solution. And unexpectedly, just one day, by watching a random film called The Matrix, the following day I had this self-realization of actually what was going on in that film, bar the science fiction part, was very similar to the way that I was living. Because every time I tried to stop smoking or drinking or taking drugs, I would get punished, but I would get punished by the internal system, my thoughts, feelings, and emotions. I'd go into lower emotional states, have hunger, fear, anxiety, to the point of breaking where I had to smoke again or drink again, because the moment I smoked, all of that anxiety, stress, fear, hunger disappeared.
mm,
That feeling of euphoria or relief or happiness came back. And the conclusion to that is don't ever try and stop, because then you will never feel that way again. But because I'd already experienced the route out, I knew that what my mind was telling me wasn't true. And it was this self-realization that I don't have a drink or a drug problem, I have a mental health problem,
mm,
because it was the perpetuation of what was going on inside of me rather than what my behavior was. And so at that point, from watching The Matrix, this self-realization, I flipped everything on its head. Instead of looking externally for help, I went into my
mm.
mind and opened up a dialogue, and I started to retrain and switched off eventually all of those addictions.
Beautiful. Speaking of the Matrix, a lot of people consider it to be not a movie, but a documentary. And I agree with that.
100%.
Yeah,
You know,
wow.
every time Morpheus is with Neo, he's not
Oh, yeah.
teaching Neo a lesson, he's actually teaching you a lesson.
All of us.
Yeah.
Yes. You mentioned addiction, smoking, drinking, and drugs. When you have all of those at a young age, what protected you in a way so you didn't go any further down in the underbelly of life and society and get into gangs and criminal activity?
Well, I mean, to be honest, like it's very hard to avoid all of that. You do get sucked into that.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't really have gangs, but there were people that used to go to football. There were certain.
Hooligans, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that went on. Although I wasn't really a massive part of that, I did experience it for a while. Friends of mine were quite involved with some of that criminality. Yes, there was drug dealing going on, but drug dealing was going on more to be able to pay for that person's individual usage. It's all glamorized, drink,
Sure.
drug, drug dealing and stuff like that. But, back in my time, there were really big prison sentences and stuff. So it's very, very hard. Like if we fast forward, from the early 1990s, late 80s to now, you know, drug dealing and drug usage is it's all. I'm not saying it's decriminalized here, but it's low level crime now, where before it was high level crime. But the war on drugs here and across the world, the war is over. I mean, we are legalizing drugs across the planet
Cat
because
is
the farm.
legalized. And Thailand is legalized. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the pharmaceutical industry have now, bought up all the cannabis plantations. And so things like MDMA, ketamine, LSD, cannabis, you can, in the UK now, you can get it for the medical use. I can go to specialist clinics in London and take LSD for the day, for
Wow.
my mental health. and people are microdosing, and I can get, THC cannabis now from my chemist opposite. I've still got to fill out a form and do an online
Mm.
telephone consultation, but as long as I say I've got mental health issues, I can get it. So, but the problem that we've got now and across the world, just like we have a problem with the pharmaceutical industry or the drugs that are being given to everyone, no one is talking about the side effects of the addictive nature. So we're all being told about, cannabis can help with multiple sclerosis, or, these other drugs can help with your mental health, but we're not talking about the side effects, and the consequences. See, every time you take a drug, there is a consequence to it. Now, if you have a serious medical need, you take whatever drug you want. I'm not an anti-pharmaceutical person, but there's a big push for people to use, but there's no, it's like in this country with the lottery and gambling, you have an advert that says gamble aware or drink aware, or, but there's no solution to the problem. It's just, it's on a surface level, when addiction and mental health is a subconscious thing. It goes on in your mind, but no one's being given this really basic information of that your thoughts, feelings, and emotions are not you. You have the ability to have dialogue with your mind.
Sure.
So none of this is mainstream information. It's not being taught by our NHS, by doctors, by government, by our peers. So people are enslaved or entrapped inside these systems and mechanisms with no route out. So in this country, we are at pandemic levels with all of this now. So for all of these reasons that I just said,
Mm.
it's
Makes
quite
sense.
serious. Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you mentioned one of the event that defined your life and changed your life was a passing of your brother due to overdose. Talk to us about that. What happened?
So yeah, so me and my twin brother, we had a very similar upbringing. He was he was definitely more intelligent than me. He did better at school. He ended up working in the solicitors, then he went into a very posh travel company, and he worked his way up to where he was actually running this whole department. And I think he was one of the first people to sell £1 million worth of holidays in a month. It had never been done. So he was very inspiring, and through that he was given a green ticket to travel the world and test out all the hotels. And but with that lifestyle came a lot of hospitality. So free drink, free this, free that. So he was, wherever he went, he was like, oh my goodness, the head of this company is coming. And so he was, but that then progressed into a drink problem. There was also some recreational drug problem, and eventually he then lost his job.
Mm.
But he went from there into the money markets, which because he had the sales experience. But when you go into the money markets, there's lots of cocaine use, and so he only lasted about 6 months. Had a mental breakdown, went into rehab, and he was in rehab for like over a year. I think it may have even been about 18 months. But when he came out, I ended up giving him a job with me, and because I was like 6, 7 years free of drink and drugs.
Mm.
So I'd gone on and successfully started up and run a successful business. So he came and worked with me. And then it was 25 years from when we went clubbing that there was this club reunion. And I said, look, do you want to go? And he said, yeah, let's go meet some old friends and stuff. But at that night, he decided to take some ecstasy. I tried to convince him not to, but I couldn't physically stop him. And unfortunately, after 25 years of abusing your body, the drug had an adverse effect inside of him,
Mm.
and body just couldn't support the drug anymore. And then, yeah, he had difficulties in the club, and it's probably too upsetting to go through the story, but yeah, he passed away. That it was an accidental drug overdose, and
Mm.
and it just completely destroyed my life.
Sure.
I had a complete breakdown. I almost physically lost the business that I was running. My wife then had to then take over the business, and even to a point where I probably should have been sectioned. I wasn't compos mentis and stuff like that. So it took a while, and I definitely contemplated suicide for the first time in my life because of the pain.
Mm,
I'd never experienced so much pain, and I'm a very open-minded person and not really, a religious person, but I
mhm.
remember looking up and just saying, I never signed up to this. This is not, you
Yeah,
know.
too much.
So, but that's what then turned my, I'd already cracked the code of addiction, but I'd never written it. I never shared, it wasn't, I never shared it. Of course I talked about my recovery and stuff, but it was at that point, if I'm not going to go and I'm going to stay, then I need to do something. It created a purpose inside of me that everything that I'd known up to that point just disappeared. And this purpose of I need to go and make a difference. I never want someone to experience what I've just
Yeah.
experienced. And so, overcoming all of that, I don't know, conditioning that you're not good
Mhm.
enough and everything else, I just, I put pen to paper and I wrote, it took me about a year. I wrote this book, which is now what you said, which is The Road to Freedom from Addiction, Get Your Life Back. And from that, I then wrote the 7-day beat addiction plan, which, ultimately gives you the tools and techniques to be able to help yourself, through mental health and addiction.
Yeah. Speak of addiction, you mentioned smoking, drinking, and drugs. Two-part question: which one was, in your case, especially the most devastating, and which one was the hardest for you to overcome?
So yeah, I mean, it's we talk about drink, drugs, and stuff, but it's the drink and drugs is actually what gives you entry into your mind.
Mm,
What with mental health, it's the way that we've wired our behaviors to certain things. So the drink and drugs are the catalyst to dependency, but
mhm,
dependency and want and need is actually coming from the system. So but I suppose the work, and I took, everything right up to crack cocaine, and I tried heroin. But I never injected it. It was more smoking. But I did cross those levels.
mm,
I suppose the worst drug I ever took was cannabis,
mhm.
and that's quite surprising to people when smoking a joint and you get stoned. But actually, cannabis is one of the only drugs, the molecules, because as you ingest it, smoke it, however you put it into your body, the molecule size, it has the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier. So
Wow.
so cannabis is one of the only drugs that poisons the brain, and it's your brain that creates the perception of the world that you perceive. So in layman's terms, it creates when you're not smoking it, everything becomes a problem.
Mm.
So and that is potentially like psychosis, paranoia, those kinds of things. The hardest drug to ever come off, believe it or not, is sugar, like refined
Oh,
sugar.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
So
absolutely.
because as much as it looks like the most weakest of the addictions, when you get to crack and heroin or alcoholism or smoking, it's there's enough of an understanding or evidence that says you should stop. But when you've got an ice cream or a chocolate biscuit, where's the argument not to consume it? So it's we give it to our kids. It's rewarded through our lifetime. Everyone has a dinner, and then the reward is your pudding. And that's how we were brought up. So it's very difficult to try and explain to someone that actually processed sugars are poison in the body. It creates potential type 2 diabetes. Sugar is a fuel to cancer cells and
Hmm.
everything. So it's but where is but people don't really recognize that. So the argument to stop sugar is really difficult. And then the other difficultness in that is that smoking, drinking, recreational drugs and everything else, you don't ever need it. It's not, you don't need it for survival, but food we still have to consume. And something like, I don't know, 70% of the food that we consume now has some sort of refined sugar in it, because refined sugar, mixed with fats and salts, creates chemical reactions in the brain. Dopamine is released, dopamine being the prehistoric mechanism to repeat
Yeah.
behaviors. So supermarkets and that will only stock fast moving products, which means sugar.
Sugar is everywhere, like bread, pasta, rice, pizza, everything. It's in everything pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, we when we teach people through sugar addiction or dependency, like we don't, we never, it'd be very, very difficult to remove all sugar. So what we do is we say, let's get rid of the non-essential sugars.
Mm.
So chocolate crisps, biscuits, cakes, puddings, ice cream, sweets, as much as they
Soft drinks.
you know, well, we stay away from like the energy drinks, the high caffeine, high sugar, but you still need to drink, you still need to socialize. So yes, you can make better choices, but the processed side of foods we just leave alone. It becomes personal choice. It's a bit like if someone's a vegan, vegetarian,
Mm.
pescatarian, whatever someone might be, we don't really get into that. We just say let's remove the crack cocaine of the food industry so that you can potentially make better choices and keep that pancreas not working so hard and stuff like that. But listen, none of it is easy.
Mm. Of course.
Any path to recovery, even with the solution to the problem, you still got to work really hard, but the elation that you get after working really hard will continue for the rest of your life.
Sure.
Whereas addiction, the elation will only come when you can afford to pay for it, and then you've got to suffer the consequences for the rest of your life. So this is what we do. We show people that there's actually a better life on this side than there ever was this side.
Absolutely. And you mentioned you've been free and clear for a few years now.
So yeah, so it's got to be like I always remember it. I mean, I stopped at certain things at certain times. I never stopped everything at once. I wish I did, but I
Mhm.
didn't. We all get, you know, we're just not willing to give everything up at the same time.
Yeah.
We believe that we got control of things when we never actually had control of things. But I suppose, you know, we definitely don't count days. I only know the years because I stopped everything maybe a year before my son was born.
Mm.
So he's about to go to 18, so that would have been nine. So 19 years, everything was gone. Maybe 20 years for the drugs and stuff like that. So it's been a very long time, but I've been actively teaching and helping people for the last 10 years since I lost my brother.
Hmm. So, how has your life changed since your brother's passing?
To know, like it's not been an easy,
Sure.
definitely. In the world that I, or the way that I help people, there's a lot of sacrifice. And it's cost me my marriage. It's cost,
Mm.
that there's been a lot of debt. There's been a lot of, but this is the thing. Once you have a purpose, it's really hard to get off that. you
Hmm.
know, at, at no point do I ever want any kind of negativity for anyone. And
Sure.
but unfortunately, when something so bad happens to you, it's really difficult to. It changes. It's a bit like COVID. Like the world is shifted now
Mhm.
because of what happened through COVID, and the world will never be the same. And it's a bit like me when that happened to what happened to my brother. It changed me forever.
Mhm.
And I understand that, but I'm very respectful of my ex-wife and my son and my family, but you do become distant. You do become, it does, but as I said, it's difficult, but it was either I went or I stayed and made a difference, and it was
Mhm.
so. But it's not that I'm unhappy. I try and create happiness every day. So but I still know that life is very, very difficult and stuff like that. So, but we all at some point in our lives are going to experience something like this: a loss of a parent, the loss of a sibling, a loss of a job, a loss of a relationship. As human beings, we're not good at emotional turmoil.
Mhm.
This is why we look for escapism. But society's very good at giving us escapism in drink and drugs and gambling and sex and pornography and Netflix and social media and
Video games.
so we're very good at suppressing and we're almost frightened to wake up. Part of the treatments that we do is like an awakening, and I suppose it's more of a spiritual awakening, but without religion. It's a waking up to an understanding of what's going on around you, whereas before you couldn't see it because we were all part of the system. But once you disconnect from the system, and I mean like mind and physical
Mhm.
body, that you start to see the reality of the world, and with that reality you can make better changes, and you can create change for other people. So
So, what is your purpose nowadays? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What fuels you? What is the fire in your belly right now?
it's yeah. So I mean, look, for the last 10 years, I've gone on and helped many thousands of
Mhm.
individuals. So and I've gone on, I used to do big London seminars for hundreds of people. Through lockdown, I was doing webinars for thousands of people. And I've set up retreats and clinics, and, I've brought in a lot of cellular therapies. I've worked with a lot of psychiatrists, doctors. So I've gone the full round of everything that I could possibly do with it. But the realization now after 10 years is it's fine helping and saving the life of an individual, but it's an individual.
Mhm.
And when I was running the length of the UK last year, it was this realization that you're doing a good job, Chris, but you're not doing enough. And so now what I've created is I've started a trainer program, or a coaching program, where I'm now going to coach other people to help the individuals. Because if I can, train a coach, that coach can go on and help those thousands of people that I've did over the last 10 years and stuff like that. So that's what I've done now. And I've
Mhm.
just started my first coaching group. And yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Wow, what a story. What a story. And we have barely even just scratched the surface. What an incredible life you've been blessed with, and consequentially been blessed with incredible gifts. And now that your stage of your life that you've embraced your gifts, you understood them, and now you're sharing them loud and proud. And we're gonna do that for part two in a week or so, including your incredible feats of running across the length of the UK from top to bottom, 915 miles, and what, 20 days or something like that? You said 29 days? And
Yeah,
then,
so yeah, 30 days door to door, but it's 29 days running.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Mm.
now, to top that off even more, swimming across the English Channel, 21 miles, which will be, what, 17 hours? It's going to be quite a journey.
Yeah.
So,
If I could do it under, that would be great.
yeah.
The quicker you get across, the better. But so yeah, I'll see like the training from now until then,
Mm,
be a better understanding of, because I've swum like 10 kilometers, so I've
mm,
got like a time for that. But the next 10 kilometers are going to be slower. The following 10 kilometers are going to be slower. So, I need to push some boundaries to
sure.
get to see what physically see. When I was running, and it was, between May and June, they're the longest days sunshine. So I knew I had, 12 hours every day to 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 complete those distances. So I was never under pressure. But in the sea, you can't stop. So running, I can stop at a petrol station, have an ice cream, take a drink, sit, enjoy the view. But in the sea,
Can't.
it's survive, like literally from the moment you go, you've got to hit land and survive that. It's a survival thing rather than a.
Because at sea, I guess if you stop, the current is going to take you way further away.
Yeah, you can't. If you stop swimming, they reckon if you stop swimming for 10 minutes, it could create an extra couple of hours on your swim because of the current. So you have to keep swimming to follow the currents. But the moment you stop, then you drift.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it's very important that you have to keep going. So
Yeah.
it's a tremendous, like I said, it's not the longest swim in the world now, but it's the most world famous, it's the most famous swim in the world.
Sure.
And it's this, as I said, this year is the 150th anniversary. So it's been going for 150 years. Um, yeah, they are very, it's a very protected thing as
Mhm.
well. It's a bit like I said to you, golf. The rules of golf have gone on for 150 years or 200 years, however long golf has been around. So they're very protective of it.
Mhm.
I've rocked up down there. People who have swum all their lives, this is their life's achievement to go and swim. Where it's not my life achievement. I've rocked up there going, yeah, I'm going to swim the English Channel, but without really the respect and the history and knowing, so I've had a bit of kickback from that, so I have to try and be a bit more humble
Mhm.
and I suppose the other thing with me, I never see me as a problem, but the way I am, and I try not to use conditions, but if you put me on the spectrum of ADHD, sometimes an ADHD person is harder to get along with because the way that they are can sometimes not work with someone else's, so I'm going there all innocent thinking, yeah, but to someone else it could look a little bit disrespectful, and I don't mean to be,
Mhm.
just the way I am, and like, yeah, I'm going to do it and stuff like that. So it's trying to understand, the people that it's their life and it's their life's ambition, and the people that have succeeded and already done it and stuff like that. So it's trying to fit into that thing, because I think it's very similar to the we talked about this before, climbing to the top of Everest. It's just
Yes.
become so commercialized. It's almost like it's not even an achievement because you
Yeah.
got 150 people queuing just to get onto the top. So it doesn't seem like an achievement. It just seems like, well,
Disneyland, like yeah.
yeah, Disneyland. So, but that is actually what's happening with the English Channel. It's
Really.
becoming commercialized. It's people are just rocking up and going, yeah, I'm gonna, without the full understanding and the respect of the sea and the people that have gone before, the people that have died because of it, the only 40% ever succeed. They want the people that understand the history rather than everyone just rocking up and saying, yeah, I'm going to swim the channel, where do I pay, which then causes more risk and more disappointment and stuff like that. And so it's about respect, I suppose, which
Mhm.
is, which is fine.
Absolutely, absolutely. And most importantly, respecting nature. Mother Nature doesn't care, and is ruthless in a good way, you
Yeah.
know? So, listen, Chris, we're going to unpack all of that. I have so many
Right.
questions on that on the next conversation part two, but let's call it a day for today. If someone wants to connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
So so direct is beatmyaddictions.com.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll find lots of information on there. There's also an inquiry form that they could fill out, and I could get in touch with them if it's overseas and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and yeah, our charity side is robhillfoundation.org. So this is where we do our free support groups, free 7-day plan. Um, so yeah, just come and find us. Facebook, Chris Hill, Beat My Addictions on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I've started to do some TikTok videos to try and, connect with a younger audience. My avatar used to be 40 to 50-year-olds, because that's the self-realization that life hasn't worked out for them, but now it's 20 to 30-year-olds because of the damage that's being done really early now.
Mm-hmm.
So so and especially with the ketamine and the bowel problems and stuff like that we have here in the UK. So we've got a much younger audience. So by doing a few TikTok videos and trying to connect with them, but as I said, like by me now training coaches
Mm-hmm.
of all different ages and backgrounds, then we should be able to start hitting most communities to try and get them the help.
Absolutely, absolutely. Listen, I'll absolutely love that. Can't wait to unpack all of that for next episode, part two. So, in the meantime, I salute you. Stay
Thank
safe,
you.
stay awesome. You're a true leader with a heart. Keep shining your light, keep blessing the world, your presence, your impact, and keep inspiring people around you with not only your story of overcoming addiction, but also of what you're trying to achieve now, which may seem make impossible become possible, and going from impossible to I am possible. So that's amazing. Salute to you, brother. Stay safe, stay awesome. God bless you. Keep warm and cheering for you. Warm and happy trainings in the water, So keep warm and very much looking forward to the next conversation very soon next week, my friend. Take care. Have a great one. Cheers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.